Welcome to Books of the Book. We've been studying the letters of Paul to the Thessalonians, and in previous programs we've been working our way through 1 Thessalonians, and now we're at the very conclusion of that series of studies, 1 Thessalonians 5 and verses 12 through 27. I'm John Pauline, Dean of the School of Religion at Loma Linda University, and with me is my pastor, John Ciccarelli, pastor of the Calamasa Seventh-day Adventist Church. John?
John, it's good to be together again, and we're finally bringing 1 Thessalonians to a close. Looking forward to 2 Thessalonians in our next episode. But today we're looking at verses 12 through 27, and Paul just gets really practical here. He talks about leadership. He has a lot of admonitions that we're going to look at, but really practical stuff for the church. So I'm looking forward to our study today. Why don't we jump into that?
All right. Well, this is one of those places where the Greek scholarship really is extremely helpful, because in verses 12 through 22, you have a series of 17 admonitions. But interestingly enough, the first 9 of these, which are about mentoring and discipleship, leaders and members, how they relate to each other, the first 9, the verb comes first. So it starts with the verb, and then you have a little statement. Then the last 8, where he's talking about how to deal with attitudes toward prophecy and attitudes relating to prayer and joyfulness. The verb comes at the end each time. So you have these clipped statements. First 9, the verbs at the beginning. Second 8, the verbs at the end. It's a little bit like black preaching, I think. He's got a cadence going.
He's
on
a roll.
He's on a roll, and I think we're going to have some fun with this.
Yeah.
Very good.
Great.
So why don't we get started, and we can go right into verses 12 and 13. Perhaps you could read that for us.
Paul says, "Now we ask you, brothers, to respect those who labor among you, and who are placed over you, and who admonish you, and to regard them super highly on account of their work. Be at peace with one another."
A couple things I want to say about that passage right away. First of all, it builds on verse 11. He summed up everything he said before with encourage one another. Be encouraging to one another. I think what we're getting into here is sort of explicating that. Encourage one another, you see. And the other thing I would mention is in these 2 verses, he's talking to the members of the church and how they're supposed to relate to their leaders.
As a pastor, I really like this verse.
Okay.
But, I like what he brings up here, though, because there's a lot to be said for mentoring and discipleship. I mean, Jesus said, go make disciples. And sometimes I think if we're not careful, things can just become all about programs, at the church. Programs, more programs, more programs. And you can have lots of programs without any discipling taking place, without any intentional leadership taking place. And as leaders, we have to be extra careful, and we've talked about this in some of the other episodes about keeping ourselves in check, that we're not just trying to build our empire, our personal empire, but that we are, by the grace of God, allowing Him to build up His kingdom through us in the lives of people. And that's something I know I always have to keep myself in check on, that I'm not just about productivity or empire building. I don't want that at all. I want God's kingdom to reign in me and to reign in those that I'm leading. And by His grace, that happens. When I came to the Calamasa Church, and they had their search committee together, some people may know Louis Venden, and he was on that search committee. A little intimidating, when you show up to the search committee and Louis Venden is sitting there.
He's one of my faculty and very highly regarded.
Oh, yes, and great preacher. And I asked Lou afterwards, I said, Lou, if God wills it that I come here in Calamasa, would you be willing to enter into a mentoring relationship? I saw God was giving me a gift in Lou if I came to Calamasa to continue to build into my life as one of my mentors. And of course, he said, he's such a humble man. He says, this would be a mutual thing. I said, no, Lou, let's get this right. It'd be completely downward mentoring. You would be mentoring me. And we get together about every 6 weeks. We have lunch together, and the Spirit of God just oozes out of him. But we need to allow the church to be a safe place where we can have mentors who can minister the love of God to us and grow us and disciple us in that. And our churches, I think, it's important that they're multi-generational. One of the sad things is we see so much segregation with the generations. And I think we miss out on a lot of the discipling in that way because we have this cutting off of the generations, and so we don't have the older generations building into the younger generations. And the younger generations are missing out as well. I was leading worship one time at a church in San Diego. And we would do some choruses, but we would do some hymns as well. And we did Savior Like a Shepherd, lead us, that hymn. And I had someone in their 40s come up to me and say, "Wow, I really love that new song you did today." And I said, "What song was that?" "The one about the shepherd." And I thought, my goodness, this person has never heard this hymn, and he's been raised in the Adventist church his whole life. Obviously, there was some segregation there, but it's important. It's important that we keep the generations together and that we be intentional about our mentoring and our discipling. And so I could go on forever, on this, but I'm gonna stop it there so we can continue moving to our text. But this is something that's close to my heart.
All right, appreciate that very much. You're probably wondering what Pastor John's so excited about in this text. It's because Paul is telling the members how they should treat their leaders. And he tells them to respect them highly. He says, "Those who labor among you, who are placed over you and admonish you, respect them highly." You see, he's encouraging people. He says, somebody who's in charge within the church. It's tough work. It's difficult stuff, and they need encouragement too. We sometimes say, well, the pastor does all the encouraging, and we just sort of knock back. But no, pastors need encouragement too, and Paul is saying this here. Now, at this stage of the church's history, it's very early. And they don't have officers yet. Later on, they were elders and deacons and bishops and different things like that. But this is only 20 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus. And basically, the only office here is it says, those who are placed over you. It's interesting, the early church shied away from the leadership language of ancient Rome. They had words that we get words like hegemon, monarchy. These are all based on the Roman Latin and so on. And it has the idea of someone who's in power over you. The only leadership word that the early church accepted from that whole scene was this word, those who are over you. Because in the Roman context, those who were over you were people who cared about you. It was almost a family kind of a thing, the caring connection. And the Christians said, that's a word we can use. But these other words, they only applied to Jesus. It's very interesting. Later on, they picked up words from the synagogue and the home that they used, elders, deacons, and so on, language that they used for leadership. Now here he says, respect those who labor among you, regard them super highly. Paul loves that word, super. Regard them super highly who admonish you. And this word admonish is a tough Greek word. It kind of means knock some sense into you. So do you ever have to do that, Pastor?
Absolutely. No, but sometimes
Tell me about it.
I have members who recognize I need some sense knocked into me too every once in a while. But no, it's not always welcome. I mean, I think personally, it's hard for us to welcome when someone comes up and admonishes us, maybe tries to knock some sense into us. But it's that, I think it's that tough love, being willing to say the things that someone might need to hear because you love them so much. If we never talked honestly in that way, then we prevent people from growing in their relationship with God and maybe their relationships with others. And I mean, look at Jesus. Look at all the tough love he gave to the religious leaders when he was there. There was a lot of tough love. And he spoke those things because he loved them. But it's not easy.
Well, confrontation is critical to relationship because it's letting people know that there's things that they're doing that will scuttle the relationship unless they're made aware of that, unless some change comes in. As a Bible scholar, I have to deal with that. When I'm going to some tough biblical text and I make it clear, everybody says, oh, wonderful. I just love that, you see. But then sometimes I go to a text that a person thought was clear to them. I say, that's not really what it's saying. Suddenly, you're not so popular anymore.
It all changes.
And so Paul here is saying, look, this is tough work, this admonishing. So give them respect and show the right attitude. Interestingly enough, there's a whole background here. I talked about the popular philosophers in earlier programs that were going around in the cities just like Paul was. And they had this whole idea of how to diagnose where people were at and to be sensitive to when they're open to conviction and when they're not, when you can admonish them and when you can't. There's a right timing to talk to people. There's an appropriate remedy and an inappropriate remedy. All that stuff is discussed in detail in ancient Greek writings. And examine yourself before you admonish somebody else.
Yeah.
Paul adds one thing to all of this, and that is that God ultimately is the model of leadership, not us. And if we're following God's model of leadership, then we will know when to admonish and when not. So, but Paul doesn't balance it out here.
Yeah.
He can be tough on leaders too. In 2 Corinthians 10:13, he holds them accountable. So balance is important here. Yes, hold your leaders respectful, honor them, but at the same time, hold them accountable.
Yeah.
Both things are necessary, and finding that balance can be the tough thing.
Yeah, and I think, it's important to remember that leaders, pastors, and so forth are still in discipleship. They're still being led by God, hopefully, and we're still, it's not like the pastor is the master discipler and he's discipling everybody, but he's also being discipled by God through his congregation or whoever the leader might be, those that they're leading, and looking to God to continue to disciple him. And when that happens, then we become, like you said, lead like Jesus. Jesus was a servant leader. It was, oftentimes we look at organizational structure and leadership and we think of this pyramid with the leader at the top. But Jesus really flipped that pyramid upside down, where he was at the bottom and he was lifting and he was serving and he was edifying. And that's really the model of leadership that we see in God, that he became a servant, left heaven to come and serve us, to love us so much and to save us, And the other part that's so important, I think, with leadership is that who we are when the spotlight's not on is who we really are.
It's about character.
Exactly.
And we talked about that in chapter 2, didn't we?
Yeah.
Well, we need to move ahead, verses 14 and 15. And let me mention once again, these translations are my own, so that we can try to get some of the flavor of the grammar of the Greek from time to time and the unusual meanings of words. We also encourage you, brothers, it says, admonish the unruly, cheer up the discouraged, take an interest in the weak, be patient with everyone. See that no one pays back evil for anyone else's evil, but always pursue what is good toward one another and toward everyone. Here I see him talking to leaders about confronting people and so on. And the language here is very interesting. He says, admonish, knock sense into the unruly. The Greek word for unruly here kind of has the meaning of people who are willfully difficult. There are people who are just messed up, but there are other people who are trying to be difficult, who are disruptive by nature. These are the ones you knock sense into. He says, then there are people who are discouraged. The Greek word here actually could be translated little souls. These are people who think small. People who don't have a lot of self-confidence. And then he says, in addition to that, take an interest in the weak. The weak are people who have moral and spiritual limitations. They're easily discouraged. They're fearful. In fact, pastors sometimes stay away from them because they say, they're never going to change. These are people, no matter what you say, they never carry it out. You see? So Paul here is counseling the leaders how they're to deal with people. And the final word in this verse is where he says, look, don't pay back evil for evil. If you're a leader, evil's going to happen. If you're a leader, you're going to be criticized. If you're a leader, you're going to have to suffer. Don't pay back, because the minute the leader pays back the way he's been treated, that it disrupts the entire community. It's a disaster. So some super counsel from Paul here about practical, everyday affairs. It's time to go for a break. We'll see you back in just a little bit.